Have you ever felt trapped by your own mind? Thoughts that twist, worry, and hold you back? You are not alone. Every day, millions struggle silently with negativity that steals focus, drains energy, and clouds clarity. But there is a way to intercept those thoughts before they control your life. Your mind is stronger than you think. What if you could recognize destructive patterns the moment they arise and replace them with calm, constructive focus? What if the power to regain control has always been within you, waiting to be activated? This is not just about stopping negative thoughts. It's about understanding why they appear, how they grow, and learning step-by-step ways to neutralize them. By the end of this video, you will discover practical, actionable ways to reclaim your mind and prevent negativity from taking charge. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn can shift your thinking, change your focus, and protect your peace. It's time to take control before negative thoughts take control of you. Negative thoughts rarely arrive with warning. They often enter the mind quietly, blending into daily thinking patterns. Many people assume these thoughts are their own, without realizing they are influenced by stress, fear, or past experiences. Over time, these thoughts gain strength simply because they are left unchecked. This is how control slowly begins. Before these thoughts take shape, something else happens internally. A sense of hesitation appears. A pause. A moment where the mind does not fully agree with the negativity. That pause matters more than people realize. It creates space between emotion and reaction, which prevents instant damage. This inner pause often shows up as calm reasoning. You might suddenly question a negative idea instead of accepting it. You may feel less emotional about a situation that once triggered you. This shift is not accidental. It is a protective response that slows mental escalation. When negativity fails to take immediate control, its power weakens. The thought loses urgency. It fades instead of expanding. This early interruption protects emotional balance and prevents long-term stress from forming. Control is stopped before it even begins. Most people try to fix negative thinking only after it becomes overwhelming. By that point, the mind is already exhausted. Stress hormones are active, focus is scattered, and emotions feel unstable. Fighting thoughts at this stage feels difficult because the damage has already started internally. What actually helps is early mental intervention. This happens before a thought turns into belief. Instead of reacting, the mind redirects attention. You may notice yourself switching tasks, breathing more steadily, or thinking about something neutral. These small changes stop mental momentum. This early shift protects emotional energy. Instead of draining focus on harmful thinking, the mind preserves clarity. Productivity improves. Decision-making feels easier. Emotional reactions feel less intense. These are signs that control has already been limited. When early protection is in place, negativity struggles to return. The mind becomes less reactive and more observant. Thoughts are noticed rather than absorbed. This awareness creates long-term stability and reduces mental fatigue over time. Negative thoughts grow strongest when they are ignored. When a harmful idea is repeated without challenge, it slowly becomes familiar. Familiar thoughts feel normal, even when they are damaging. This is how temporary feelings turn into long-term mental patterns. The most effective protection happens at the beginning. When a negative idea first appears, something internal recognizes it as unhelpful. That recognition weakens the thought before it settles. It never gets the chance to grow roots in the mind. Early awareness changes mental direction. Instead of spiraling, the mind shifts toward logic or calm reflection. Emotional reactions slow down. The body relaxes. Stress signals decrease. This prevents long-term anxiety from forming. By stopping negativity at its starting point, mental balance is preserved. The mind stays flexible and responsive instead of rigid and defensive. Over time, this creates stronger emotional control and a healthier thinking process that supports peace and clarity. The human mind acts like an open space where ideas enter constantly. Some thoughts are helpful, while others create pressure, doubt, or emotional strain. Without awareness, harmful thoughts slip in unnoticed and begin shaping reactions. Over time, this affects confidence, focus, and emotional stability in subtle ways. What protects the mind is an internal filtering process. Certain thoughts fail to stay because they do not align with clarity or peace. You may notice that some ideas simply do not hold your attention anymore. They arrive briefly and disappear without effort. This filtering creates mental boundaries. It prevents emotional overload and reduces overthinking. Instead of reacting to every idea, the mind becomes selective. This selection process keeps emotional balance intact and prevents unnecessary stress from building. When mental boundaries are strong, control remains with the individual. Thoughts no longer dictate emotions instantly. The mind feels calmer, more stable, and less reactive. This is how inner balance is preserved without constant struggle. Every person has emotional pressure points shaped by past experiences, stressful memories, disappointments, or failures often influence present thinking. Negative thoughts tend to target these sensitive areas, trying to reopen old emotional responses. Protection begins when these areas are strengthened internally. You may notice reduced emotional reactions to situations that once felt overwhelming. Triggers lose their intensity. The mind stays grounded instead of replaying old patterns. This strength does not remove memories, but it changes how they are processed. Instead of emotional pain, there is understanding. Instead of fear, there is clarity. This shift prevents negative thoughts from using the past as leverage. When emotional weak points are reinforced, confidence grows naturally, self-doubt fades, inner stability increases. The mind becomes less vulnerable to mental attacks that once felt unavoidable. There are moments when calm appears without explanation. Nothing external changes, yet emotional tension suddenly fades. These moments often feel unexpected, but they serve an important purpose in mental protection. This calm interrupts rising negativity. It prevents stress from escalating into anxiety or frustration. The nervous system relaxes, allowing clearer thinking. Decisions become less emotional and more balanced. These moments of peace often arrive before problems grow. They create distance between thought and reaction. That distance allows logic to replace fear and clarity to replace confusion. When calm appears early, damage is avoided. Emotional stability remains intact. Over time, these quiet interruptions build a stronger, more resilient mindset that resists negative influence naturally. Negative thinking often survives through repetition. When the same idea appears again and again, it starts to feel true, even if it is not. The mind becomes familiar with the pattern and stops questioning it. This repetition slowly shapes mood, behavior, and emotional reactions. What breaks this cycle is interruption. You may suddenly lose interest in a thought that once felt urgent. The mind shifts focus before the thought finishes its pattern. This interruption weakens the habit of repetition. When repetition is broken, emotional pressure reduces quickly. Stress levels drop. The body relaxes. The mind no longer feels trapped in a loop. This change often feels subtle but powerful. Without repetition, negative thinking struggles to survive. It fades instead of growing. Over time, this creates mental space for healthier ideas and calmer emotional responses. Awareness is one of the strongest mental protections. Many harmful thoughts only gain control when they go unnoticed. Once awareness increases, those thoughts lose their advantage. They are seen clearly instead of absorbed automatically. You may notice yourself catching a negative idea mid-thought. Instead of continuing it, you pause. That pause gives the mind a choice. Choices weaken automatic reactions. With awareness, correction becomes possible. You may adjust your thinking gently rather than forcefully. This keeps emotions stable and prevents internal conflict. As awareness grows, the mind becomes more disciplined. Thoughts are observed instead of followed. This creates long-term emotional balance and mental clarity. Some negative thoughts feel convincing because they sound logical. They often mix facts with fear, making them difficult to challenge. This combination creates mental confusion and emotional tension. What weakens these thoughts is clarity. When the underlying assumption is questioned, the emotional charge fades. Logic replaces fear. Understanding replaces panic. Once confusion clears, the mind regains control. Emotions settle. The body relaxes. Decisions become more balanced and less reactive. Without emotional fuel, convincing negative thoughts collapse. They lose their grip and stop influencing behavior. Truth restores mental stability. Fighting thoughts directly often increases their strength. Resistance creates tension, and tension feeds mental pressure. This makes negative thinking feel louder and more persistent. A more effective approach is replacement. When attention shifts to something constructive, the negative idea loses space. The mind cannot fully focus on two opposing thoughts at once. This replacement feels natural rather than forced. The emotional state improves gradually. Stress reduces without struggle. Focus returns without effort. Over time, replacement trains the mind to choose healthier thinking automatically. Negative thoughts appear less often and disappear more quickly. Negative thinking drains mental energy. Prolonged stress exhausts focus, motivation, and emotional control. When energy is low, the mind becomes more vulnerable to harmful ideas. Restoration begins when the mind slows down. Breathing deepens. Muscles relax. This physical response supports mental recovery and reduces tension. As energy returns, thinking becomes clearer. Emotional reactions soften. Problems feel manageable instead of overwhelming. With restored strength, the mind resists negativity more effectively. Stability increases, and emotional resilience improves naturally. Many negative thoughts attack identity. They question worth, ability, and value. Over time, this creates insecurity and self-doubt that affect daily decisions. Protection begins when identity becomes clearer. The mind remembers past successes, strengths, and growth. This balanced view weakens self-criticism. When identity is stable, external pressure loses influence. Opinions and failures no longer define self-worth. Emotional reactions become less extreme. A clear sense of identity provides mental defense. Confidence increases, and negative thoughts lose their power to control behavior. Hope often appears quietly. It does not announce itself loudly, but it changes emotional direction instantly. A hopeful thought reduces fear and lightens mental weight. This shift feels like emotional relief. The mind opens instead of closing. Possibilities replace limitations. Fear loses urgency. With hope present, stress responses calm down, breathing steadies, focus improves. Emotional balance returns naturally. Hope prevents negative thoughts from settling. It keeps the mind future-focused and emotionally flexible, reducing long-term anxiety. Isolation intensifies negative thinking. When the mind feels alone, thoughts echo without challenge. This creates exaggerated fears and emotional heaviness. Connection weakens this effect. Exposure to truth, perspective, or reassurance interrupts mental distortion. Isolation loses control. When connection is restored, emotions stabilize. The mind processes situations more realistically. Overthinking slows down. Connection reminds the mind it is not trapped. This awareness reduces pressure and restores emotional balance. Timing plays a critical role in mental protection. Small delays often prevent emotional mistakes. A pause before reacting changes everything. Distraction at the right moment can stop negative escalation. Attention shifts before stress reaches its peak. This prevents emotional overload. These small interruptions feel ordinary but are powerful. They protect decision-making and emotional health. Over time, this timing builds discipline. Reactions slow. Clarity improves. Control remains intact. The past often fuels negative thinking. Memories replay with emotional intensity, triggering regret or shame. This keeps the mind stuck. Healing begins when memories are reframed. Lessons replace blame. Growth replaces regret. Emotional charge reduces. As memory changes, emotional reactions soften. The past loses control over the present. This shift allows forward movement. Mental freedom increases. Emotional clarity returns. Negative thoughts often feel loud and urgent. They demand attention and create pressure. This intensity overwhelms calm reasoning. A quieter inner response changes the dynamic. Calm thinking lowers emotional volume. Urgency fades. When calm takes over, clarity improves. Reactions slow. Decisions become thoughtful instead of rushed. Calm thinking weakens chaos. Emotional stability becomes the default state. Inner guidance often appears as discomfort toward harmful thinking. It acts as an alert system rather than a command. This early signal matters. When the signal is noticed, adjustment happens naturally. Thinking shifts before damage occurs. This guidance improves decision-making. Emotional balance stays intact. Stress is reduced early. Over time, this internal alert strengthens. The mind becomes more self-regulated and stable. Urgent thoughts push quick reactions. They create pressure to decide immediately. This often leads to regret. Slowing down breaks urgency. Space allows logic to surface. Emotional clarity improves. With slower responses, mistakes decrease. Confidence increases. Emotional control strengthens. Clarity restores balance. Control returns to the individual, not the thought. Negative thoughts often distort reality. They magnify problems and minimize solutions, making situations feel heavier than they truly are. When this distortion takes hold, the mind reacts emotionally rather than logically. This creates unnecessary fear and mental pressure that clouds judgment. Balance returns when perspective is restored. The mind begins to see situations as they are, not as fear presents them. Details become clearer. Emotions soften. What once felt overwhelming starts to feel manageable again. With restored perspective, fear loses its grip. The body relaxes, breathing steadies, and focus improves. Decisions are made with calm awareness instead of panic-driven reactions. When perspective becomes stable, exaggerated thinking fades. The mind stays grounded in reality, preventing negativity from shaping emotional responses or future expectations. Mental clarity improves when false ideas are challenged consistently. Repeated exposure to accurate information reshapes thinking patterns over time. This process strengthens mental resilience and reduces vulnerability to harmful assumptions. As clarity increases, the mind becomes less reactive. Emotional responses slow down. Stress no longer dominates attention. Thoughts are processed thoughtfully instead of impulsively. This consistent correction builds confidence. The mind trusts its ability to assess situations without exaggeration. Doubt loses influence, and calm reasoning becomes habitual. Over time, clarity replaces confusion. Negative thoughts lose credibility, and emotional balance becomes easier to maintain in daily life. Having negative thoughts does not indicate weakness. It reflects a mind responding to pressure, uncertainty, or fatigue. Understanding this reduces self-judgment and emotional strain. When self-blame is removed, mental recovery accelerates. The mind feels supported rather than criticized. This creates space for healing and rational thinking. Acceptance allows improvement without shame. Emotional balance is restored gently instead of forcefully. This prevents internal conflict and exhaustion. With compassion toward oneself, the mind stabilizes. Negative thoughts lose their emotional charge, making long-term control possible. Negative thinking often predicts negative outcomes. It assumes failure before effort begins. This expectation shapes behavior and reduces motivation. When future focus shifts, optimism replaces fear. Possibility becomes visible again. Motivation increases naturally without pressure. This shift affects actions. Confidence improves. Effort feels worthwhile again. Emotional energy returns. With renewed expectation, outcomes improve. The mind aligns with progress instead of resistance, reducing mental blocks. Calm mental states interrupt harmful thinking patterns. Silence within the mind allows clarity to surface. Without constant noise, false ideas become easier to recognize. This quiet does not require force. It emerges naturally when emotional tension fades. Stillness replaces urgency and confusion. In this space, thoughts are evaluated instead of followed. Emotional control strengthens. Reactions become intentional. Silence exposes negativity as unnecessary noise. Once exposed, it loses power and fades naturally. External environments influence internal thinking. Noise, pressure, and constant stimulation increase mental stress. Over time, this makes negativity more likely. Small changes create relief. A quieter space, reduced distractions, or slower routines calm the mind. These adjustments support emotional stability. As the environment improves, focus returns. The mind processes information more clearly. Emotional reactions soften. These subtle changes protect mental health. Stability grows without dramatic effort or disruption. Certain influences encourage negative thinking. Constant exposure to criticism, conflict, or pessimism shapes internal dialogue. Distance from these influences creates relief. When separation occurs, clarity improves quickly. Emotional pressure decreases. The mind regains control. This distance allows healthier thinking patterns to form. Emotional balance strengthens. Stress levels drop. With fewer negative inputs, the mind becomes calmer and more focused. Control returns naturally. Rushed decisions often lead to regret. Negative thoughts push urgency, forcing action without clarity. This creates emotional consequences. Patience interrupts this process. Time creates space for logic. Emotional intensity decreases. With patience, choices improve. Confidence increases. Regret becomes less common. Slower decisions protect emotional well-being and improve long-term outcomes. Emotional boundaries protect mental stability. Without boundaries, stress from others enters easily. This increases emotional exhaustion. Strong boundaries limit unnecessary pressure. Emotional energy is preserved. Focus improves. With boundaries, the mind stays centered. Reactions become measured instead of reactive. This protection supports long-term emotional health and reduces negative thinking. Some thoughts disappear quickly without effort. This is a sign of mental clarity. Harmful ideas fail to leave a trace. When the mind releases thoughts easily, emotional recovery accelerates. Stress does not linger. Peace remains. This release improves focus and emotional strength. Mental space opens for productive thinking. Quick release prevents accumulation of stress. Emotional balance stays intact. Focus plays a powerful role in mental control. Scattered attention invites anxiety. Concentration stabilizes emotional responses. When focus strengthens, fear weakens. The mind stays present. Overthinking reduces. With sustained focus, emotional discipline improves. Distractions lose power. A focused mind resists intrusion. Stability becomes the default state. Negative thoughts often enter during moments of mental fatigue. When the mind is tired, it becomes less selective and more accepting of harmful ideas. Focus weakens, and emotional reactions feel stronger than usual. This is why negativity often appears late at night or during stressful periods. Mental recovery starts with rest and slowing down. When the mind is allowed to reset, thinking becomes clearer. Emotional responses soften. The intensity of negative thoughts decreases without confrontation. As clarity returns, the mind regains control. Thoughts are evaluated rather than absorbed. Emotional balance improves naturally without effort or pressure. With consistent recovery, mental fatigue loses influence. The mind becomes more alert, resilient, and capable of rejecting harmful thinking patterns. Negative thoughts often exaggerate personal responsibility. They place blame where it does not belong. This creates guilt, pressure, and emotional heaviness that distort reality. When responsibility is reassessed, emotional weight reduces. The mind separates what can be controlled from what cannot. This distinction brings relief. With balanced responsibility, self-criticism fades. The mind adopts fairness instead of harsh judgment. Emotional stability improves. This balanced thinking restores confidence. Negative thoughts lose credibility when reality is viewed accurately. Uncertainty fuels negative thinking. When outcomes are unclear, the mind fills gaps with fear-based assumptions. These assumptions feel convincing because they address the unknown. Stability begins when uncertainty is accepted rather than resisted. The mind stops demanding immediate answers. Emotional tension reduces. Acceptance creates mental flexibility. Instead of fearing outcomes, the mind prepares calmly. Stress decreases. With acceptance, uncertainty loses control. The mind stays grounded, reducing anxiety and emotional overload. Negative thoughts often focus on worst-case scenarios. They predict extreme outcomes without evidence. This creates unnecessary fear and hesitation. Reality-based thinking counters exaggeration. The mind evaluates facts instead of assumptions. Emotional responses soften. As facts replace fear, decision-making improves. Confidence returns. Emotional pressure eases. This realistic approach prevents unnecessary stress. The mind stays focused on what is likely, not what is imagined. Mental comparison triggers negative thinking. Measuring progress against others creates dissatisfaction and doubt. This comparison ignores individual circumstances. When focus returns inward, comparison loses relevance. Personal growth becomes the priority. Emotional pressure decreases. Self-focused thinking improves motivation. Confidence grows. Progress feels meaningful again. Without comparison, the mind experiences freedom. Negative thoughts lose a major source of influence. Negative thoughts often resurface during silence. When distractions fade, unresolved emotions emerge. This can feel overwhelming if the mind is unprepared. Healthy reflection replaces fear-driven rumination. Thoughts are observed calmly instead of judged. Emotional balance improves. Reflection brings understanding. Understanding reduces tension. The mind processes emotions constructively. With healthy reflection, silence becomes peaceful instead of threatening. Control replaces fear. Fear-based thinking narrows perception. It limits options and creates tunnel vision. This restricts creativity and problem-solving. Expanded thinking restores flexibility. The mind considers multiple possibilities. Emotional pressure decreases. With broader perception, confidence improves. Challenges feel manageable instead of threatening. This expansion weakens negative thinking. The mind regains control and adaptability. Negative thoughts often question progress. They dismiss achievements and focus on setbacks. This creates discouragement. Recognition of progress restores motivation. Small wins regain value. Emotional energy returns. When progress is acknowledged, confidence strengthens. Effort feels worthwhile again. This recognition prevents discouragement from taking control. The mind stays forward-focused. Emotional overload invites mental confusion. Too many thoughts compete for attention, increasing stress. Focus collapses. Simplification restores clarity. Priorities become clear. Emotional noise fades. With fewer mental demands, decision-making improves. Calm replaces chaos. Simplification strengthens control. Negative thoughts lose space to operate. Consistency protects mental stability. Irregular habits create emotional unpredictability. This makes the mind vulnerable. Stable routines support clarity. Predictability reduces stress. Emotional balance improves. With consistency, the mind feels secure. Focus strengthens naturally. This stability prevents negative thoughts from gaining influence. Control remains steady. Mental pressure increases when expectations are unrealistic. When the mind demands perfection, even small mistakes feel overwhelming. This creates constant tension and dissatisfaction that fuels negative thinking. Relief begins when expectations are adjusted. Progress is measured realistically instead of ideally. This reduces emotional strain and restores balance. With realistic expectations, effort feels lighter, motivation improves, confidence returns because success feels achievable again. Balanced expectations prevent unnecessary stress. The mind becomes supportive rather than critical, weakening negative thought patterns. Negative thoughts often distort time. They focus heavily on past mistakes or imagined futures, pulling attention away from the present moment. This creates anxiety and regret. Grounding attention in the present restores clarity. The mind focuses on what can be done now instead of what cannot be changed. With present focus, emotional reactions soften. Stress reduces. The body relaxes. Living in the present limits negative thinking. Control increases as attention stays grounded. Unexpressed emotions feed mental tension. When feelings are ignored, they surface as negative thoughts. This internal pressure builds silently. Expression releases this tension. Whether through reflection or communication, emotions lose intensity when acknowledged. As emotions are processed, clarity improves. The mind feels lighter and more balanced. Healthy expression prevents emotional buildup. Negative thoughts lose their source. Negative thinking often misinterprets neutral events. Silence feels like rejection. Delays feel like failure. These assumptions increase emotional strain. Clarification restores accuracy. The mind reassesses situations with logic instead of emotion. As understanding improves, emotional reactions calm. Anxiety reduces. Accurate interpretation prevents unnecessary stress. The mind stays grounded and rational. Mental overload reduces problem-solving ability. When too many concerns compete for attention, clarity disappears. Negative thoughts thrive in this confusion. Prioritization restores order. The mind focuses on one issue at a time. Emotional pressure decreases. With clear priorities, action feels manageable. Confidence improves. Organized thinking limits negative influence. Control returns naturally. Negative thoughts often challenge self-trust. They question decisions and abilities repeatedly. This weakens confidence. Self-trust rebuilds through reflection on past choices. Remembering successful decisions restores confidence. As trust strengthens, hesitation decreases. Emotional stability improves. Strong self-trust blocks negative doubt. The mind remains steady. Fear-based assumptions amplify uncertainty. When information is incomplete, the mind fills gaps negatively. This increases stress. Patience allows facts to emerge. Waiting reduces speculation and emotional strain. With clearer information, reactions become balanced. Anxiety fades. Patience protects clarity. Negative assumptions lose power. Negative thinking often thrives during isolation from routine. Irregular schedules disrupt emotional balance. This increases vulnerability. Structured routines restore stability. Predictability calms the mind. With routine, focus improves. Emotional regulation strengthens. Consistency reduces negative influence. Stability becomes habitual. Mental exhaustion increases sensitivity. Small issues feel overwhelming when energy is low. Negative thoughts exploit this state. Recovery restores resilience. Rest improves emotional regulation and focus. As energy returns, perspective improves. Problems feel manageable. Proper recovery protects mental clarity. Negative thinking weakens. Clarity strengthens emotional control. When thoughts are organized, emotions respond calmly. Confusion fuels negativity. Intentional reflection restores clarity. The mind processes, experiences thoughtfully. With clarity, decisions improve. Emotional responses stabilize. Clear thinking prevents mental overwhelm. Control remains steady. Negative thoughts often grow stronger when the mind feels rushed. Constant urgency keeps attention scattered and emotions tense. This mental speed reduces awareness and allows harmful thinking to pass without resistance. Slowing the mental pace changes everything. When actions and thoughts become deliberate, clarity improves. Emotional reactions soften. Stress begins to loosen its grip. With a calmer pace, the mind evaluates situations more accurately. Impulsive conclusions are replaced with balanced understanding. Confidence increases naturally. A slower rhythm protects mental health. It creates space for calm decisions and prevents negative thoughts from dominating attention. Mental habits shape emotional stability. Repeated thinking patterns become automatic over time. When these patterns are negative, they influence mood and behavior silently. Change begins with recognition. Once patterns are noticed, they can be adjusted gradually. This reduces emotional strain and builds awareness. As habits shift, the mind responds differently to stress. Emotional reactions become predictable and controlled. Healthy mental habits strengthen resilience. Negative thinking loses its automatic influence and fades over time. Negative thoughts often question effort. They suggest that progress is pointless or too slow. This discouragement reduces motivation. Reframing effort restores purpose. Every step forward regains value. Progress becomes visible again. With renewed purpose, motivation increases. Emotional energy returns. Persistence feels worthwhile. This perspective prevents discouragement from taking control. The mind stays focused on growth. Overthinking increases emotional exhaustion. When the mind circles the same idea repeatedly, clarity disappears. Stress builds quietly. Mental release restores balance. Letting go of unnecessary analysis reduces tension and improves focus. As overthinking slows, calm returns. Emotional reactions become manageable. Reduced mental noise protects clarity. Negative thoughts lose momentum. Negative thinking often exaggerates consequences. Small mistakes feel catastrophic. This fear limits action. Balanced evaluation restores realism. Mistakes are seen as learning experiences rather than failures. With realism, confidence improves. Willingness to act returns. This balanced view prevents fear from controlling decisions. The mind remains steady. Emotional sensitivity increases during uncertainty. When outcomes are unclear, the mind becomes alert and tense. This invites negativity. Acceptance reduces tension. The mind releases the need for immediate certainty. With acceptance, stress decreases. Emotional balance improves. This calm approach limits negative influence. The mind stays grounded. Negative thoughts often challenge patience. They demand instant results and immediate clarity. This creates frustration. Patience restores emotional stability. Time allows understanding to develop naturally. With patience, pressure reduces, confidence increases. Patience protects long-term focus. Negative urgency loses power. Mental resilience grows through experience. Each challenge builds strength when processed calmly. Avoidance weakens confidence. Facing difficulties with balance improves self-trust. Emotional reactions become controlled. As resilience increases, stress tolerance improves. The mind stays composed. Strong resilience reduces negative impact. Stability becomes consistent. Negative thinking often narrows attention. It fixates on one issue and ignores context. This intensifies stress. Widening perspective restores balance. Multiple viewpoints reduce emotional intensity. With broader awareness, solutions become visible. Expanded focus weakens negativity. Consistency in mindset strengthens control. Irregular thinking creates instability. This increases vulnerability. Stable thinking patterns restore balance. Emotional regulation improves. With consistency, clarity remains steady. Stress reduces. A consistent mindset prevents negative thoughts from dominating. Control stays firm. Negative thoughts often appear when the mind feels unsupported. When someone feels misunderstood or unseen, inner dialogue becomes harsher. This lack of reassurance creates emotional vulnerability that invites self-criticism. Support restores balance, even when it comes from within. Self-acknowledgement reduces emotional pressure. The mind begins to respond with understanding instead of judgment. With internal support, confidence stabilizes. Emotional reactions soften. The need for external validation decreases. This inner reinforcement weakens negative thinking. The mind becomes steadier and more self-sustaining. Mental pressure increases when expectations are unclear. When goals lack definition, the mind fills gaps with worry. This uncertainty fuels negative assumptions. Clarity restores direction. Clear intentions reduce confusion and emotional strain. The mind knows where to focus. With direction, effort feels purposeful. Anxiety decreases. Motivation improves. Defined expectations protect mental stability. Negative thoughts lose room to grow. Negative thinking often thrives in mental clutter. Too many unfinished thoughts compete for attention. This overload exhausts emotional resources. Organization restores calm. Sorting priorities reduces pressure and increases focus. As clutter clears, the mind processes information efficiently. Emotional responses become measured. Mental organization weakens negativity. Control returns naturally. Self-doubt often emerges during transitions. Change creates uncertainty that challenges confidence. Negative thoughts question readiness and ability. Stability returns when change is viewed as growth. The mind reframes uncertainty as progress. With this shift, fear decreases. Confidence rebuilds gradually. This perspective reduces resistance to change. The mind adapts calmly. Negative thoughts often amplify minor setbacks. They treat delays as failure. This exaggeration increases frustration. Patience reframes setbacks as temporary. The mind recognizes progress despite pauses. With patience, emotional reactions stabilize. Stress reduces. This understanding prevents discouragement. Momentum continues. Mental strain increases when rest is ignored. Continuous effort without recovery drains emotional strength. This fatigue invites negativity. Intentional rest restores balance. The mind recovers clarity and resilience. With proper rest, focus improves. Emotional reactions soften. Recovery protects mental health. Negative thoughts weaken. Negative thinking often resists silence. Quiet moments allow unresolved concerns to surface. This can feel uncomfortable. Mindful attention transforms silence into reflection. Thoughts are observed without judgment. With practice, silence becomes grounding. Emotional clarity improves. This calm reflection reduces fear. Control strengthens. Comparison distorts self-perception. Measuring progress against others creates dissatisfaction. Negative thoughts exploit this habit. Personal focus restores confidence. Individual growth becomes meaningful. With self-awareness, motivation improves. Emotional pressure decreases. Freedom from comparison weakens negativity. The mind stays centered. Negative thoughts often exaggerate urgency. They push rushed decisions and emotional reactions. This leads to stress. Slowing responses restores clarity. Time reduces emotional intensity. With patience, decision-making improves. Confidence returns. Reduced urgency limits negative influence. Stability increases. Mental balance depends on consistency. Sudden changes in routine disrupt emotional regulation. This instability increases vulnerability. Steady habits restore order. Predictability calms the mind. With routine, focus strengthens. Emotional balance improves. Consistency protects clarity. Negative thoughts lose influence. Negative thoughts often appear strongest when the mind is overwhelmed with responsibilities, daily pressures, unresolved issues, and constant multitasking create an invisible stress load. This pressure lowers mental defenses, making harmful ideas feel more convincing and urgent than they really are. Without intervention, these thoughts begin to dominate emotional responses, clouding judgment and reducing overall clarity in decision-making, often leaving a person feeling trapped in a cycle of worry and self-doubt. Breaking this cycle requires deliberate mental focus. The first step is recognizing which thoughts are automatic and which are meaningful. By identifying the pattern early, the mind gains the ability to redirect attention toward constructive ideas and realistic solutions. This awareness does not eliminate challenges but reframes how they are perceived, turning moments of potential stress into opportunities for measured action rather than emotional reaction. As focus strengthens, emotional resilience naturally improves. The mind begins to distinguish between what deserves energy and what does not, creating a buffer that prevents minor stressors from escalating into intense mental battles. This process fosters a growing sense of internal security and self-assurance, allowing the individual to respond calmly even in situations that once felt overwhelming. Over time, consistent practice of mental redirection and self-awareness reduces the frequency and intensity of intrusive negative thoughts. The mind becomes more selective about the ideas it entertains, strengthening control and fostering a sustained state of calm, clarity, and emotional balance that can withstand external pressures without collapsing into worry or fear. Negative thinking often emerges when people dwell on unresolved past experiences. Memories of failures, disappointments, or regrets tend to resurface at unexpected moments, stirring emotions that feel as intense as the original experience. These intrusive recollections often create a distorted perception of the present, making it difficult to appreciate achievements or progress because the mind remains anchored in previous mistakes. Processing these memories effectively begins with acknowledgement rather than suppression. Recognizing the emotions associated with past experiences allows the mind to address them consciously, reducing the power they hold over current thinking. Reflection, when approached objectively, transforms memories from sources of fear and doubt into opportunities for learning, helping the individual gain perspective and build emotional strength. As reflection deepens, the mind begins to differentiate between what actually matters in the present and what belongs in the past. Emotional reactions are tempered and stress diminishes. Over time, the constant pull of old regrets weakens, allowing clearer thinking and more rational decision-making to take precedence. With consistent effort, this method of mindful reflection fosters resilience against repetitive negative thinking. The mind becomes capable of recognizing the onset of intrusive memories and responding calmly, rather than reacting impulsively, creating a long-term mental habit of peace, clarity, and emotional stability that supports a more positive and productive daily life. Negative thoughts often thrive in the absence of a clear sense of purpose. When goals are vague or undefined, the mind fills the void with worry, fear, and imagined obstacles. The lack of direction creates uncertainty, and uncertainty fuels speculation, overthinking, and mental stress. Without a guiding focus, even minor setbacks appear magnified, and the mind becomes increasingly vulnerable to discouragement and self-doubt. Creating a sense of purpose begins with clearly defined objectives, no matter how small. Identifying priorities and aligning actions with those priorities directs energy toward meaningful outcomes. This alignment reduces the room for mental wandering and prevents the proliferation of unnecessary negative thoughts that often arise from aimlessness. As the mind gains direction, emotional stability improves, confidence grows because actions are intentional rather than reactive, the perception of challenges shifts, difficulties become temporary obstacles rather than insurmountable problems. A clear sense of purpose acts as a stabilizing force against mental chaos. Over time, consistent focus on purposeful action trains the mind to anticipate challenges proactively. This structured approach reduces uncertainty and fosters resilience, allowing the individual to navigate complex situations calmly, maintain mental clarity, and resist the infiltration of harmful thoughts that previously would have taken hold during moments of indecision or confusion. Negative thinking frequently arises from the tendency to ruminate over what-if scenarios. The mind imagines possible negative outcomes and often inflates them, creating a sense of impending disaster even when there is no immediate threat. This form of anticipatory stress elevates anxiety, distorts judgment, and undermines the ability to respond rationally to real situations. Interrupting this pattern requires conscious attention to the present moment. By focusing on observable facts rather than imagined possibilities, the mind can distinguish between actual risks and hypothetical concerns. Simple strategies such as grounding attention in immediate sensory experiences can prevent spiraling thoughts and reduce the emotional intensity associated with imagined threats. As attention shifts to the present, emotional tension begins to decrease. The mind no longer invests energy in hypothetical problems, freeing resources for logical problem solving and proactive decision-making. Confidence returns as individuals recognize their ability to navigate reality rather than imagined fears. Sustained practice of grounding techniques fosters long-term resilience against negative anticipatory thinking. The mind becomes capable of intercepting intrusive what-if scenarios early, reducing their impact and maintaining a steady, calm, and focused state of awareness that supports mental clarity and emotional balance. Negative thoughts often target self-esteem by emphasizing perceived failures or inadequacies. When the mind focuses excessively on what one has not accomplished or attributes shortcomings as permanent flaws, emotional energy diminishes and confidence erodes. Over time, this pattern fosters a distorted self-image, making even neutral or positive experiences seem insufficient. Countering this tendency begins with conscious acknowledgement of achievements, no matter how small. Recognizing progress shifts focus from deficiencies to accomplishments. This recalibration fosters a more balanced self-assessment and reduces the emotional pull of negative comparisons or self-criticism. As recognition of personal progress strengthens, emotional reactions become more stable. The mind is less susceptible to fear-driven self-judgment and begins to trust its ability to handle challenges. Confidence builds gradually, creating a protective mental framework against recurring negativity. Consistent reinforcement of accomplishments over time diminishes the influence of self-esteem-based negative thoughts. The mind develops a habit of self-validation and balanced self-reflection, leading to enduring emotional resilience, increased self-confidence, and a reduced likelihood of being dominated by harmful internal dialogue. Negative thoughts frequently gain traction when the mind is exhausted. Mental fatigue reduces focus, impairs judgment, and lowers resistance to intrusive ideas. Even minor stressors can feel magnified, and emotional reactions intensify, creating fertile ground for self-doubt, worry, and pessimism to take hold. Restoration begins with intentional breaks and mental recovery. Pausing from demanding tasks, engaging in light activity, or simply allowing moments of stillness replenishes cognitive and emotional energy. As energy returns, the mind can assess situations more accurately and react with balanced responses rather than impulsive negativity. With recovered focus, emotional reactions moderate, the mind begins to differentiate between significant threats and minor challenges. Stress diminishes and cognitive clarity improves, making problem-solving more effective and decision-making more deliberate. Over time, incorporating regular recovery periods builds a sustainable defense against fatigue-induced negative thinking. The mind becomes more resilient, capable of maintaining focus, and better equipped to intercept harmful thoughts before they escalate into emotional turbulence. Negative thinking often thrives on perceived lack of control. When events feel unpredictable, the mind attempts to compensate by imagining worst-case scenarios. This creates tension, anxiety, and a heightened sense of vulnerability that can influence decisions and reactions disproportionately. Restoring a sense of control begins with identifying actionable steps. Even small, manageable choices reinforce agency, reducing the perceived threat of unpredictability. When the mind focuses on solutions rather than problems, emotional energy shifts from worry to constructive planning. As practical action increases, emotional responses stabilize, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and negative thoughts lose urgency. The mind recognizes that challenges are manageable, even if outcomes remain uncertain. Over time, cultivating a sense of agency strengthens mental resilience. Negative thinking about uncontrollable circumstances loses dominance, and the individual experiences a steady, grounded state capable of responding calmly and strategically to unexpected situations. Negative thoughts often escalate when the mind magnifies criticism from others. External feedback, real or imagined, can be internalized and interpreted as personal inadequacy. This internalization intensifies stress and fosters a pattern of self-doubt that feeds repetitive harmful thinking. Counteracting this pattern requires separating facts from interpretation, understanding that external opinions are influenced by perspective, context, and bias reduces their emotional weight. The mind learns to evaluate criticism rationally rather than emotionally. As perception shifts, confidence stabilizes, emotional reactivity diminishes, allowing the mind to focus on constructive growth rather than defending against imagined attacks. With sustained practice, internal resilience develops. The mind becomes less reactive to external criticism, reducing negative thought cycles and fostering long-term emotional stability and self-assurance. Negative thinking often gains strength when expectations for immediate results are high. When progress is slow or unseen, the mind interprets the lack of visible outcomes as failure, creating frustration and disappointment that compound emotional tension. Patience and long-term perspective disrupt this pattern. By focusing on gradual progress and recognizing incremental achievements, the mind rebalances expectations and reduces emotional strain. As understanding deepens, emotional reactions moderate, frustration diminishes, and confidence in personal effort returns. The mind recognizes that growth is a process, not an instant outcome. Consistently practicing patience over time reduces the influence of negative thoughts tied to unrealistic expectations. Emotional stability improves, focus remains intact, and motivation continues without the burden of unnecessary self-criticism. Negative thoughts often arise from the fear of failure. The mind anticipates mistakes and magnifies potential consequences, leading to hesitation and emotional tension. This fear creates a self-reinforcing cycle where worry fuels indecision and indecision amplifies fear. Interrupting this cycle requires proactive problem-solving and small steps. Taking measurable, controlled action builds evidence of capability, gradually replacing imagined risks with real accomplishments. As confidence in one's actions increases, emotional tension decreases. The mind experiences a growing sense of competence, and fear-driven thinking loses its power over decisions and behavior. Over time, repeated success and measured progress rewire the response to potential failure. The mind becomes capable of approaching challenges with composure, clarity, and resilience, reducing the frequency and impact of fear-based negative thoughts. Negative thoughts often arise when the mind overestimates potential threats. Small challenges are magnified into crises, creating emotional tension that feels disproportionate to the actual situation. This amplification causes stress, anxiety, and an exaggerated sense of urgency, making even simple tasks seem overwhelming and draining mental energy that could be used constructively. Disarming these thoughts begins with separating perception from reality. By objectively evaluating what is likely to happen versus imagined catastrophes, the mind regains clarity. Attention shifts from hypothetical dangers to actionable steps that provide tangible solutions, reducing the emotional hold of imagined threats. As realistic assessment becomes habitual, emotional responses stabilize. The mind no longer reacts impulsively to imagined problems, and stress diminishes naturally. Confidence increases as the individual recognizes their capacity to manage real challenges without being controlled by fear. Over time, consistent practice of separating perception from reality strengthens mental resilience. Negative thoughts lose the ability to escalate situations unnecessarily, and the mind develops a grounded, calm, and controlled approach to both minor and significant challenges. Negative thinking often strengthens when self-criticism is constant. The mind focuses disproportionately on perceived flaws, failures, or inadequacies, magnifying them until they dominate emotional states. Over time, this persistent self-judgment lowers confidence and reduces the ability to respond to challenges with clarity. Breaking this cycle requires conscious acknowledgement of both strengths and weaknesses. By objectively recognizing personal achievements alongside areas for growth, the mind restores balance, creating a healthier internal dialogue that diminishes the emotional power of self-criticism. As balanced self-perception develops, emotional regulation improves. The mind becomes less reactive to internal negative commentary, allowing focus to remain on productive action rather than internal conflict or doubt. Sustained practice of self-reflection and balanced evaluation gradually reduces the intensity and frequency of self-critical thoughts. Emotional resilience strengthens. Negative self-talk loses influence, and confidence grows steadily. Negative thoughts often intensify when the mind is exposed to constant uncertainty. The unknown triggers imagined risks, causing worry and emotional strain. The longer uncertainty persists, the more the mind fabricates scenarios, creating a feedback loop of stress and doubt that can impede decision-making. Addressing this begins with distinguishing between controllable and uncontrollable factors. Focusing on what can be acted upon empowers the mind and reduces emotional vulnerability. Accepting elements beyond control prevents unnecessary energy expenditure on imagined outcomes. As the mind practices focusing on actionable factors, confidence and emotional stability improve, stress responses diminish, and the individual feels capable of navigating uncertainty with composure rather than fear-driven hesitation. Over time, this approach fosters mental resilience. The mind develops the ability to encounter uncertainty without succumbing to negative speculation, creating sustained emotional balance and clarity in both everyday and high-pressure situations. Negative thinking frequently escalates when the mind interprets temporary setbacks as permanent failures. Minor mistakes or delays are blown out of proportion, causing frustration, guilt, or hopelessness. This exaggerated perspective can immobilize action and increase emotional tension, perpetuating the cycle of negativity. Restoring perspective involves reframing setbacks as temporary and situational rather than inherent personal flaws. The mind begins to view challenges as opportunities for learning and growth, which reduces emotional charge and encourages problem-solving rather than rumination. As reframing becomes habitual, emotional resilience improves. Setbacks no longer trigger excessive stress, and the individual gains confidence in their capacity to navigate difficulties. Emotional responses become proportionate to reality. Over time, consistent perspective adjustment diminishes the power of negative thinking. The mind learns to approach obstacles with clarity, adaptability, and composure, maintaining long-term emotional stability. Negative thoughts often emerge when attention is scattered. Multitasking, overload, or constant distractions prevent the mind from fully processing information. This mental fragmentation intensifies stress and leaves room for intrusive, self-defeating ideas to take hold. Focus restoration begins with deliberate prioritization. Concentrating on one task or thought at a time enhances clarity and reduces emotional tension. Attention becomes selective, and the mind naturally dismisses irrelevant or harmful thoughts. As sustained focus strengthens, emotional responses stabilize. The mind becomes capable of evaluating situations calmly, making rational decisions without interference from scattered or negative thinking. Over time, deliberate focus trains the mind to maintain control even under pressure. Negative thoughts lose their foothold, and mental clarity becomes a default state for navigating complex or demanding situations. Negative thinking often flourishes during periods of social comparison. Observing others' achievements or perceived advantages can trigger self-doubt, envy, or insecurity. This comparison distorts perspective, increases stress, and diverts attention from personal growth and accomplishments. Breaking this pattern requires conscious self-reflection and emphasis on individual progress. Recognizing personal milestones, strengths, and achievements restores confidence and reduces the emotional weight of comparison. As the mind shifts from external benchmarks to internal evaluation, emotional stability improves, motivation increases, as progress is measured realistically, and negative thoughts tied to envy or self-doubt lose their intensity. With consistent practice, the habit of social comparison diminishes. The mind remains centered, self-focused, and resilient against the influence of external pressures, maintaining clarity and emotional equilibrium. Negative thoughts often intensify when the mind perceives lack of control over outcomes. This perception amplifies worry, fear, and imagined consequences, creating stress that feels disproportionate to actual circumstances. Emotional energy is consumed by anticipation rather than constructive action. Restoring a sense of control begins by identifying small, actionable steps. Even minimal decisions reinforce agency and reduce feelings of helplessness. By focusing on what is controllable, the mind redirects energy from anxiety toward practical solutions. As agency strengthens, emotional responses stabilize, confidence returns, and fear-driven thoughts lose urgency. The mind approaches challenges with calm determination rather than reactive worry. Over time, repeated practice of focusing on controllable elements builds resilience. Negative thinking linked to perceived loss of control diminishes, and sustained clarity and calmness become habitual. Negative thinking often grows when self-reflection becomes judgmental rather than observational. Overanalyzing actions and behaviors through a critical lens fosters guilt, shame, and emotional tension, creating a feedback loop that perpetuates harmful thought patterns. Shifting self-reflection toward neutral observation reduces the emotional intensity of negative thoughts. By assessing experiences objectively, the mind separates facts from internalized criticism, fostering understanding and clarity. As neutral self-reflection becomes routine, emotional regulation improves. The mind can recognize mistakes or areas for improvement without becoming overwhelmed by judgment or fear. Over time, this approach cultivates resilience against negative thought cycles. Emotional stability strengthens, self-awareness improves, and the mind maintains clarity and calm in evaluating both successes and failures. Negative thinking often escalates when the mind underestimates personal capabilities. Focusing on potential shortcomings rather than skills and experience magnifies doubt, reduces confidence, and increases anxiety about future challenges, making problem-solving feel more daunting than it is. Reinforcing awareness of abilities restores balance. Reflecting on past achievements, strengths, and coping strategies strengthens confidence and reduces the emotional power of doubt-driven thoughts. As self-efficacy improves, emotional responses stabilize. The mind approaches challenges with greater composure and rationality, reducing the frequency and intensity of negative thinking. Over time, consistent acknowledgement of personal capabilities builds resilience. Confidence becomes habitual, and negative thoughts tied to perceived inadequacy lose influence over both thinking and behavior. Negative thoughts often gain momentum when the mind focuses excessively on hypothetical problems. Imagining potential issues that may never occur generates anxiety, tension, and distraction, consuming emotional and cognitive resources unnecessarily. Redirecting attention toward present reality and actionable steps mitigates this effect. The mind distinguishes between likely outcomes and improbable scenarios, reducing unnecessary stress and emotional reactivity. As present-focused thinking becomes habitual, confidence grows. The mind evaluates real challenges logically, preventing imagined problems from hijacking decision-making or emotional balance. Over time, consistent practice of grounding thoughts in reality strengthens resilience. Negative thoughts tied to hypothetical scenarios diminish, enabling sustained clarity, calm, and productive focus. Negative thoughts often become stronger when the mind is preoccupied with past failures. Replaying mistakes repeatedly creates emotional tension and reinforces a sense of inadequacy. This focus on errors distorts perception, making current challenges appear more threatening and overwhelming than they actually are. Over time, this self-reinforcing cycle amplifies stress, erodes confidence, and diminishes problem-solving abilities. Breaking this cycle begins with conscious acknowledgement of past experiences without attaching judgment. Recognizing that mistakes are part of learning allows the mind to release the emotional weight they carry. Reflection transforms memories from sources of anxiety into opportunities for understanding and growth. As awareness deepens, emotional reactions stabilize. The mind becomes capable of evaluating present situations based on reality rather than being clouded by past failures. Confidence gradually returns as rational assessment replaces fear-driven assumptions. Consistent practice of mindful reflection strengthens resilience. The mind learns to intercept negative thoughts before they escalate, creating a sustained state of calm, clarity, and constructive focus that improves both decision-making and emotional well-being over time. Negative thinking often arises when the mind interprets delays as permanent obstacles. A temporary setback or slow progress can feel like total failure, creating frustration and emotional tension. This exaggerated perception consumes energy that could otherwise be applied to problem solving, leaving the individual feeling immobilized and self-critical. Restoring perspective involves reframing delays as temporary and actionable, understanding that progress is incremental and that obstacles are part of the process reduces emotional intensity and builds resilience. The mind begins to evaluate situations logically instead of reacting emotionally to perceived failure. With this reframing, patience strengthens, frustration diminishes, motivation returns, and decisions are made with clear judgment. Small achievements regain importance, reinforcing confidence and reducing the influence of negative thinking. Over time, consistent application of perspective adjustment allows the mind to approach challenges calmly. Delays are seen as opportunities for growth rather than threats, minimizing anxiety and maintaining a stable, focused, and productive mental state. Negative thoughts often escalate when attention is dispersed across too many concerns. Multitasking and cognitive overload make the mind vulnerable to intrusive ideas, creating a sense of chaos and inability to manage priorities. This scattered focus increases anxiety, reduces clarity, and amplifies emotional stress. Consolidating attention restores control. By focusing on one task or concern at a time, the mind organizes thought processes and minimizes the influence of unnecessary or harmful ideas. Prioritization strengthens decision-making and reduces emotional strain. As focus consolidates, the mind experiences greater clarity, stress diminishes, and confidence in handling challenges increases. Emotional responses become measured rather than reactive. Over time, maintaining organized attention builds mental resilience. Negative thinking loses space to operate. Focus becomes habitual, and the individual navigates complex or stressful situations with calm, deliberate clarity. Negative thoughts often flourish when comparisons with others dominate the mind. Observing others' accomplishments, lifestyles, or recognition can trigger feelings of inadequacy, envy, and self-doubt. This distorted perception reduces motivation, fosters internal conflict, and increases emotional tension. Countering this requires shifting focus inward. Evaluating personal growth, achievements, and strengths allows the mind to prioritize meaningful progress rather than external validation. This self-reflective approach fosters confidence and reduces susceptibility to comparison-driven negativity. As internal focus strengthens, emotional stability improves, motivation returns, and the mind approaches challenges with determination rather than distraction or insecurity. Confidence in personal ability replaces fear and doubt. Over time, this habit of self-focused assessment diminishes the influence of social comparison. The mind remains centered, productive, and resilient, allowing negative thoughts tied to perceived inferiority to fade. Negative thinking often arises from anticipation of worst-case outcomes. The mind imagines catastrophic scenarios that are often unlikely, creating fear, anxiety, and mental strain. This focus on hypothetical disaster consumes energy and reduces problem-solving ability. Interrupting this pattern requires grounding thoughts in reality. By evaluating probabilities, the mind separates plausible outcomes from exaggerated fears. Attention shifts toward actionable solutions rather than imagined crises. As realistic thinking strengthens, emotional reactivity decreases, confidence returns, and the mind handles challenges with composure and rationality. Anxiety diminishes naturally as imagined threats lose power. Over time, habitual grounding of thoughts builds resilience. The mind becomes capable of intercepting fear-based projections before they escalate, maintaining calm, clarity, and constructive focus even under uncertain conditions. Negative thoughts often intensify when the mind underestimates personal strengths. Focusing on potential shortcomings or imagined incompetence creates self-doubt and emotional tension. Even routine tasks can feel daunting, and confidence erodes over time. Recognizing and recalling personal skills and past successes restores balance. By reflecting on abilities and achievements, the mind rebuilds trust in itself, reducing the emotional grip of doubt and fear. As self-efficacy strengthens, emotional responses stabilize. Challenges are approached with rational judgment rather than panic, and motivation increases. Confidence grows, creating a buffer against intrusive negativity. Over time, consistent reinforcement of personal capabilities ensures sustained resilience. Negative thinking tied to perceived inadequacy diminishes, and the mind maintains clarity, focus, and emotional stability even in high-pressure situations. Negative thinking frequently escalates when emotional energy is low. Mental fatigue reduces the mind's ability to filter intrusive ideas, making negative thoughts feel more compelling and urgent. Exhaustion amplifies stress responses and reduces clarity, leaving the individual feeling mentally and emotionally trapped. Intentional restoration of energy through rest, breaks, and recovery activities strengthens mental resilience. Mental and emotional replenishment allows the mind to process challenges effectively and reduce susceptibility to harmful thoughts. As energy levels return, emotional responses stabilize. The mind evaluates situations logically rather than reactively, and problem-solving becomes more effective. Stress diminishes naturally as resilience improves. Over time, maintaining recovery routines prevents fatigue-driven negativity from dominating. The mind develops sustained clarity, focus, and emotional balance, minimizing the frequency and intensity of intrusive negative thoughts. Negative thoughts often grow when emotional regulation is inconsistent. Sudden mood swings or overreactions create vulnerability to worry, self-doubt, and pessimistic thinking. These fluctuations prevent clear evaluation of challenges, leading to reactive and exaggerated responses. Consistency in emotional regulation strengthens stability. By practicing mindfulness, reflection, and measured response, the mind learns to approach situations calmly. This creates a buffer against impulsive negativity. As emotional regulation improves, stress diminishes, and confidence increases. The mind can assess challenges rationally and maintain composure, reducing the likelihood of reactive negative thought cycles. Over time, habitual emotional consistency strengthens resilience. Negative thoughts lose momentum and the mind remains balanced, focused, and capable of responding to adversity with clarity and calm. Negative thinking often escalates when the mind misinterprets feedback. Constructive suggestions or neutral observations may be perceived as criticism, triggering doubt, self-judgment, and stress. This distorted perception amplifies emotional tension and reinforces self-defeating thought patterns. Correcting this requires objective evaluation of feedback. Separating fact from interpretation allows the mind to respond appropriately without unnecessary emotional charge. This practice fosters clarity and rationality. As interpretation improves, confidence strengthens. The mind reacts to information with understanding rather than fear or doubt, reducing emotional stress and increasing productivity. Over time, consistent objective evaluation diminishes the power of negative thought loops. The mind develops resilience, emotional stability, and the ability to approach external input with clarity and discernment. Negative thoughts often dominate when attention is focused on perceived failures or imperfections. Small errors are amplified in the mind, creating disproportionate worry, frustration, and emotional strain. This focus diminishes clarity and reduces the ability to respond rationally to challenges. Shifting attention to actionable solutions and acknowledging progress restores mental balance. Recognizing achievements, no matter how minor, strengthens confidence and reduces the emotional pull of negative thoughts. As solution-focused attention becomes habitual, emotional regulation improves. The mind evaluates challenges calmly, stress diminishes, and confidence grows steadily. Over time, this approach diminishes the influence of perfectionism-driven negativity. The mind maintains clarity, focus, and resilience, allowing constructive thinking and measured emotional responses to become the default state. Negative thinking often strengthens when the mind dwells on uncertainty about the future. Imagining all possible negative outcomes creates tension that feels uncontrollable, leading to stress and hesitation. The mind's focus on what might go wrong consumes energy that could be applied to productive action, leaving the individual feeling paralyzed and emotionally drained. Interrupting this cycle begins with distinguishing between what can be controlled and what cannot. Focusing energy on tangible steps reduces the influence of hypothetical problems, while accepting uncertainty prevents unnecessary worry from dominating thought patterns. As attention shifts to actionable measures, emotional stability increases, confidence returns, decision-making becomes clearer, and the mind is able to process situations rationally, instead of reacting impulsively to imagined threats. Over time, consistently practicing this approach fosters mental resilience. Negative thoughts tied to uncertain outcomes diminish, allowing the mind to operate with clarity, calm, and constructive focus in both small and large-scale challenges. Negative thoughts often appear when the mind is fatigued or overstimulated. Excessive mental activity, prolonged stress, or insufficient rest reduces cognitive filtering, allowing intrusive and self-defeating ideas to dominate perception. Emotional reactions intensify, making challenges feel more threatening than they are. Recovery begins with deliberate mental and physical rest. Pausing, relaxing, or engaging in restorative activity replenishes cognitive and emotional reserves, creating a buffer against the influence of negative thinking. As the mind regains strength, emotional reactions moderate, challenges are evaluated logically, stress decreases, and confidence grows. Mental energy becomes available for problem-solving and rational planning rather than reactive worry. Over time, regular rest and recovery reinforce resilience. Negative thoughts lose their ability to dominate, clarity improves, and the individual develops a stable, focused, and productive mindset even under high-pressure conditions. Negative thinking frequently escalates. When the mind interprets minor setbacks as major failures, small mistakes are blown out of proportion, producing frustration, self-doubt, and emotional tension. This exaggerated focus can immobilize action and perpetuate a cycle of pessimism that affects both decision-making and well-being. Reframing setbacks as temporary and contextual reduces their emotional impact. By viewing challenges as opportunities for learning and growth, the mind regains balance and approaches problems with a solution-oriented perspective. As reframing becomes habitual, emotional reactions stabilize, frustration diminishes, confidence increases, and challenges are met with calm evaluation rather than disproportionate stress. Over time, consistent perspective adjustment reduces vulnerability to negativity. The mind develops resilience, maintains clarity under pressure, and sustains constructive thought patterns, even when faced with repeated challenges. Negative thoughts often thrive when the mind is overly critical of personal progress. Comparing current achievements to idealized outcomes creates dissatisfaction and emotional strain. The mind emphasizes what hasn't been done rather than recognizing accomplishments, reinforcing feelings of inadequacy. Counteracting this involves acknowledging incremental progress and focusing on measurable successes. Recognizing growth encourages confidence and reduces the emotional intensity of self-criticism. As self-awareness and acknowledgement increase, emotional regulation improves, confidence strengthens, stress decreases, and motivation is renewed, allowing the mind to approach challenges without fear or doubt. Over time, habitual recognition of progress diminishes the impact of self-critical negative thinking. The mind remains focused, resilient, and capable of balanced evaluation, enhancing both productivity and emotional stability. Negative thinking often increases when the mind fixates on social comparison. Observing the accomplishments or recognition of others can trigger envy, self-doubt, and emotional tension. This distorted perspective diverts energy from personal growth and fosters negative internal dialogue. Redirecting focus Inward strengthens resilience. By emphasizing personal milestones, abilities, and individual progress, the mind reduces the influence of external benchmarks and cultivates confidence independent of others' achievements. As internal focus solidifies, emotional stability improves, motivation returns, stress decreases, and the individual develops clarity in evaluating challenges and opportunities based on personal goals rather than external validation. Over time, consistent self-reflection reduces vulnerability to comparison-driven negativity. The mind maintains composure, focus, and confidence, allowing negative thoughts tied to envy or inadequacy to fade naturally. Negative thoughts often gain momentum when the mind underestimates personal abilities. Focusing on potential failures rather than actual competencies creates doubt, reduces confidence, and intensifies stress. Tasks that were once manageable feel daunting, and hesitation increases emotional tension. Rebuilding awareness of strengths restores balance. Reflecting on past successes, skills, and problem-solving abilities strengthens self-efficacy and diminishes the emotional power of doubt-driven thinking. As confidence grows, emotional responses become more stable. The mind approaches challenges rationally, evaluates options clearly, and experiences reduced anxiety, allowing for measured, intentional action. Over time, reinforcing awareness of personal abilities develops resilience against self-doubt. Negative thoughts tied to perceived inadequacy weaken, and the individual maintains clarity, focus, and confidence in navigating complex situations. Negative thinking often escalates when attention is scattered across multiple unresolved concerns. Multitasking and mental clutter reduce focus, allowing intrusive, self-defeating ideas to dominate perception. Emotional strain intensifies, and decision-making becomes less effective. Restoring focus involves prioritization and sequential problem-solving. By concentrating on one task at a time, the mind organizes thoughts and reduces mental noise, creating space for clarity and constructive thinking. As focus consolidates, emotional tension diminishes, confidence increases, stress decreases, and challenges are approached with rational judgment rather than reactive anxiety. Over time, disciplined attention enhances resilience. Negative thoughts lose their foothold. Mental clarity becomes habitual, and the individual develops a stable, productive, and calm mindset capable of navigating complex situations. Negative thoughts often intensify when the mind perceives lack of control over external events. Feeling powerless triggers worry, fear, and imagined consequences, amplifying emotional tension and impairing problem-solving. This perception can prevent effective action and perpetuate self-doubt. Restoring a sense of agency begins with identifying actionable steps, no matter how small. Focusing on controllable elements redirects energy from worry to constructive action, reducing the emotional power of perceived threats. As control is reinforced, emotional responses stabilize, confidence grows, anxiety diminishes, and decision-making becomes deliberate rather than reactive. The mind recognizes that challenges can be navigated effectively. Over time, habitually focusing on areas of control builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to helplessness lose dominance, clarity improves, and the individual maintains calm, focus, and confidence even in uncertain or high-pressure situations. Negative thinking often emerges when the mind dwells on imagined worst-case scenarios. Anticipating failure or disaster magnifies stress and consumes cognitive and emotional energy. This pattern reduces clarity, diminishes confidence, and impairs the ability to respond effectively to actual challenges. Redirecting focus toward realistic outcomes mitigates this effect. Evaluating probabilities, separating likely results from hypothetical catastrophes, and prioritizing actionable steps restores mental balance and reduces emotional strain. As realistic assessment becomes habitual, confidence and composure increase. The mind approaches challenges with rationality and calm, reducing the frequency and intensity of fear-driven negative thoughts. Over time, habitual grounding of thought processes fosters resilience. Negative thinking tied to imagined disasters diminishes, and the mind operates with clarity, focus, and measured emotional responses, even under uncertainty. Negative thoughts often dominate when the mind exaggerates potential consequences of minor setbacks. Small errors or delays are interpreted as catastrophic, creating frustration, anxiety, and emotional strain. This magnification disrupts focus and reduces the ability to evaluate situations objectively. Reframing setbacks as temporary and manageable restores balance. Recognizing that mistakes are part of learning and that delays are situational rather than permanent reduces emotional tension and fosters problem solving. As reframing strengthens, emotional responses stabilize, confidence increases, stress decreases, and challenges are approached rationally rather than with panic or self-doubt. Over time, consistent practice of perspective adjustment diminishes the influence of negative thinking tied to exaggerated consequences. The mind maintains clarity, composure, and resilience, allowing constructive focus to prevail over fear or worry. Negative thinking often becomes persistent when the mind dwells on unresolved challenges. Unfinished tasks or ongoing problems create a lingering sense of tension that feeds self-doubt and worry. The mind repeatedly replays these issues, magnifying their significance and leaving emotional energy depleted. Breaking this pattern begins with addressing challenges systematically, identifying priorities, creating a step-by-step plan, and taking measurable action reduces the perception of chaos and fosters a sense of control. The mind recognizes that problems are manageable rather than insurmountable. As structure is established, emotional responses stabilize, stress diminishes, confidence grows, and the mind begins to interpret challenges as opportunities for growth rather than threats. Anxiety no longer dictates behavior. Over time, habitual organization of tasks and problem-solving builds resilience. The mind becomes capable of intercepting negative thought cycles before they escalate, creating a steady state of clarity, focus, and emotional balance. Negative thoughts often strengthen when attention is fixated on what is lacking rather than what has been achieved. Focusing on perceived gaps or deficiencies amplifies feelings of inadequacy, worry, and frustration. This perspective distorts reality, making progress seem insufficient despite tangible accomplishments. Redirecting focus to accomplishments and measurable progress restores mental equilibrium. Recognizing even small achievements strengthens confidence and reduces the emotional intensity of self-critical thoughts. Gratitude and acknowledgement act as buffers against negativity. As recognition of progress deepens, emotional regulation improves. The mind evaluates current situations rationally, stress diminishes, and confidence in personal ability grows. Motivation is renewed as attention shifts from deficiency to constructive growth. Over time, consistent practice of focusing on achievements diminishes the power of negative thinking. The mind maintains clarity, resilience, and emotional stability, enabling constructive focus even in challenging circumstances. Negative thinking often arises when the mind anticipates criticism or rejection. The anticipation of judgment creates anxiety, stress, and self-doubt, even before any actual feedback is received. This pattern magnifies perceived threats and diminishes confidence in both personal and professional settings. Interrupting this cycle begins with objective assessment of potential criticism, evaluating the likelihood, separating facts from imagined interpretations, and preparing measured responses reduces emotional reactivity. The mind learns to approach feedback rationally rather than fearfully. As objective evaluation becomes habitual, emotional responses stabilize. Confidence strengthens and stress diminishes. allowing the individual to engage fully without being preoccupied by fear of judgment. Over time, consistent practice of measured assessment fosters resilience. Negative thoughts tied to imagined criticism lose dominance, and the mind maintains clarity, focus, and calm composure, even in situations involving evaluation or external scrutiny. Negative thoughts frequently intensify when focus shifts excessively to past mistakes. Replaying errors repeatedly reinforces feelings of guilt, regret, and inadequacy, clouding the ability to respond effectively to present challenges. Emotional energy is consumed by unresolved reflection rather than constructive action. Reframing past mistakes as learning opportunities restores balance. The mind begins to perceive setbacks as temporary lessons, reducing emotional tension and encouraging rational evaluation of current circumstances. As this mindset develops, emotional regulation improves, confidence strengthens, decision-making becomes clearer, and the mind approaches challenges without being anchored by previous failures. Over time, habitual reframing of mistakes diminishes the influence of negative thinking. Emotional resilience strengthens, focus remains sharp, and the mind maintains calm, clarity, and constructive engagement with both current and future situations. Negative thinking often grows when the mind magnifies uncertainty in decision-making. Doubts about outcomes, potential mistakes, or unforeseen consequences create emotional tension and delay action. This overanalysis can prevent progress and reinforce self-doubt. Restoring confidence begins with breaking decisions into manageable steps, evaluating options logically, prioritizing what is most important, and accepting that some factors cannot be controlled, reduces mental strain and encourages proactive action. As this approach becomes habitual, emotional responses stabilize, anxiety diminishes, confidence grows, and the mind is capable of acting decisively without being paralyzed by fear or speculation. Over time, consistent practice of structured decision-making builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to uncertainty lose their influence, enabling clear, rational, and calm engagement with challenges. Negative thoughts often escalate when the mind interprets temporary failures as permanent indicators of inadequacy. Small errors are magnified, creating emotional tension, discouragement, and a sense of hopelessness. This distorted perception reduces motivation and undermines confidence in future endeavors. Reframing failures as temporary and specific prevents this escalation. Recognizing that mistakes do not define personal value restores balance and allows the mind to focus on learning and corrective action. As reframing strengthens, emotional responses stabilize, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and the mind approaches challenges with rationality rather than fear or self-doubt. Over time, consistent reframing of setbacks builds resilience. The mind becomes capable of handling mistakes constructively, reducing the impact of negative thoughts and maintaining sustained clarity and focus. Negative thinking often appears when attention is consumed by hypothetical outcomes. Imagining worst-case scenarios inflates worry, heightens stress, and reduces clarity in decision-making. Emotional energy is expended on problems that may never occur, creating mental fatigue. Grounding attention in reality mitigates this effect, evaluating likely outcomes, focusing on actionable steps, and redirecting energy to tangible solutions restores balance and reduces the power of imagined threats. As present-focused thinking strengthens, emotional regulation improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and the mind approaches challenges with rational judgment rather than fear-driven anticipation. Over time, habitual focus on realistic scenarios builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to hypothetical outcomes diminish, enabling sustained clarity, emotional stability, and effective decision-making. Negative thoughts frequently arise when the mind underestimates personal ability to handle challenges. Self-doubt magnifies the perceived difficulty of tasks, creating stress, hesitation, and emotional strain. Even routine decisions can feel overwhelming, reinforcing a cycle of anxiety. Restoring confidence begins with recalling past successes and strengths, recognizing personal competencies and previous problem-solving experiences strengthens self-efficacy and reduces the influence of self-doubt. As confidence grows, emotional responses stabilize. The mind evaluates challenges logically, stress diminishes, and proactive engagement becomes possible without being hindered by fear. Over time, repeated reinforcement of personal capability builds resilience. Negative thoughts, tied to perceived inadequacy, fade, enabling sustained clarity, confidence, and emotional balance. Negative thinking often gains momentum when attention is scattered across multiple unresolved issues. Juggling competing demands reduces focus, increases emotional tension, and allows intrusive thoughts to dominate perception. This fragmentation diminishes productivity and magnifies stress. Consolidating focus restores clarity. Prioritizing tasks, addressing issues sequentially, and organizing thought processes reduce mental noise and create space for constructive thinking and rational decision-making. As focus strengthens, emotional reactions stabilize, confidence increases, stress diminishes, and the mind navigates challenges with measured, calm responses rather than impulsive worry. Over time, consistent attention management builds resilience. Negative thoughts lose dominance, clarity becomes habitual, and the individual maintains focus and emotional stability even in complex or demanding situations. Negative thinking often escalates when emotional energy is depleted. Fatigue, overstimulation, or prolonged stress reduces the mind's capacity to filter harmful ideas, making intrusive thoughts more convincing and emotionally charged. This vulnerability increases anxiety and reduces clarity in decision-making. Intentional recovery restores cognitive and emotional strength. Taking breaks, engaging in restorative activities, and practicing mindfulness replenishes energy, allowing the mind to respond rationally rather than reactively to stressors. As energy levels return, emotional regulation improves, confidence strengthens, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached with calm, focused reasoning rather than fear-driven reactions. Over time, habitual restoration of energy builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to fatigue lose influence. Clarity and focus become habitual, and the mind maintains composure, emotional balance, and constructive thinking under pressure. Negative thinking often strengthens when the mind ruminates on personal limitations. Focusing on what one cannot do amplifies feelings of inadequacy and prevents effective problem solving. This self-imposed limitation fosters anxiety and reduces confidence, making even achievable goals feel unattainable. Breaking this cycle requires shifting attention to actionable skills and strengths. Recognizing abilities, past successes, and areas of competence empowers the mind and reduces the perceived magnitude of challenges. Action replaces worry as the focus becomes tangible and practical. As focus on strengths increases, emotional stability improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and the mind evaluates obstacles with clarity rather than fear. Thought patterns shift from restriction to possibility. Over time, consistent reinforcement of personal capability builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to imagined limitations fade, and the mind develops a sustained ability to face challenges with calm, clarity, and rational problem solving. Negative thinking often escalates when the mind interprets minor setbacks as personal failure. A delayed outcome or unanticipated difficulty is magnified, creating emotional tension and reinforcing self-doubt. This perspective reduces motivation and undermines clarity in decision-making. Reframing setbacks as situational and temporary reduces their emotional impact. Recognizing that challenges are part of growth allows the mind to maintain perspective. Treating obstacles as opportunities for learning rather than confirmation of inadequacy As this reframing becomes habitual, emotional responses stabilize, confidence strengthens, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached with rationality and problem solving rather than panic or despair. Over time, consistent perspective adjustment diminishes the influence of negative thinking. The mind develops resilience, maintains clarity, and approaches both minor and major setbacks with calm, focused, and constructive energy. Negative thoughts frequently gain power when the mind overestimates potential threats. Imagined dangers are magnified, causing stress, anxiety, and emotional fatigue. Minor problems feel insurmountable, and the mind is hijacked by fear-driven speculation rather than practical solutions. Restoring balance begins with objective evaluation of threats. Separating realistic concerns from hypothetical scenarios allows the mind to respond rationally. Actionable steps replace imagined catastrophes, reducing emotional tension and restoring confidence. As realistic assessment becomes habitual, emotional responses stabilize, confidence returns, stress diminishes, and the mind approaches challenges with clarity and composure rather than fear-driven reaction. Over time, consistent practice of evaluating threats builds resilience. Negative thoughts lose their grip, mental clarity improves, and the individual develops the capacity to navigate uncertainty with calm, focused, and rational problem solving. Negative thinking often arises when the mind perceives a lack of control over circumstances. Feeling powerless triggers anxiety, fear, and mental fatigue, reinforcing a sense of helplessness. The more control seems absent, the stronger intrusive and self-defeating thoughts become. Restoring a sense of agency begins by identifying small, actionable steps. Focusing on what can be influenced redirects energy from worry to practical action, empowering the mind and reducing the emotional grip of perceived helplessness. As control is reinforced, emotional stability improves, confidence grows, decision-making becomes clearer, and stress diminishes. The mind learns to approach challenges with rationality rather than emotional reactivity. Over time, habitual focus on areas of control strengthens resilience. Negative thoughts tied to perceived lack of agency lose influence, and the mind maintains clarity, calm, and constructive focus even under uncertainty or pressure. Negative thoughts often intensify when attention is consumed by hypothetical future problems. Imagining worst-case scenarios magnifies stress and reduces cognitive efficiency, making everyday challenges feel overwhelming. Emotional energy is drained by concerns that may never materialize. Redirecting attention to present realities and actionable solutions reduces this influence. By evaluating probabilities, prioritizing manageable steps, and focusing on achievable outcomes, the mind limits the impact of imagined threats and regains control. As present-focused thinking strengthens, emotional responses stabilize, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached rationally rather than reactively, with clarity and calmness guiding decision-making. Over time, habitual grounding in reality builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to hypothetical scenarios lose their dominance, enabling sustained clarity, emotional stability, and effective problem-solving even under uncertainty. Negative thinking frequently grows when self-criticism dominates internal dialogue. The mind focuses on perceived flaws or failures, magnifying their importance and creating emotional tension. Over time, this persistent self-judgment reduces confidence and diminishes problem-solving abilities. Counteracting this requires cultivating balanced self-reflection. Recognizing achievements alongside areas for growth restores perspective and reduces the emotional intensity of self-critical thoughts. Internal dialogue shifts from judgment to understanding and constructive evaluation. As balanced reflection becomes habitual, emotional stability improves, confidence increases, stress diminishes, and the mind approaches challenges with rationality and composure rather than doubt or self-recrimination. Over time, consistent practice of constructive self-reflection builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to self-criticism lose their hold, clarity improves, and the individual maintains focus, calm, and a productive mindset under pressure. Negative thoughts often escalate when attention is scattered across multiple competing concerns. Juggling various responsibilities reduces focus, increases emotional tension, and allows intrusive ideas to dominate perception. This fragmentation undermines productivity and magnifies stress. Restoring focus involves prioritizing tasks and addressing them sequentially, organizing thought processes, concentrating on one challenge at a time, and eliminating unnecessary distractions strengthens clarity and reduces mental noise. As focus consolidates, emotional regulation improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and the mind approaches each challenge with measured and rational responses rather than reactive worry. Over time, consistent attention management builds resilience. Negative thoughts lose their foothold, clarity becomes habitual, and the mind navigates complex or demanding situations with calm, focus, and emotional stability. Negative thinking often becomes persistent when energy levels are depleted. Fatigue, overwork, or prolonged stress weakens the mind's ability to filter harmful ideas, allowing intrusive, self-defeating thoughts to dominate perception. Emotional responses intensify, reducing clarity and decision-making effectiveness. Restoration of energy through rest, breaks, and replenishing activities strengthens resilience. Mental recovery allows the mind to respond rationally rather than reactively, mitigating the influence of negative thinking. As energy is restored, emotional regulation improves, confidence increases, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached calmly and constructively rather than through impulsive or fear-driven reactions. Over time, habitual restoration of energy creates sustained resilience. Negative thoughts tied to fatigue lose dominance, clarity and focus become habitual, and the mind maintains emotional stability, calmness, and productive engagement under pressure. Negative thinking frequently intensifies when minor setbacks are perceived as major failures. A small mistake or temporary obstacle is magnified, creating emotional tension, frustration, and self-doubt. This distorted perception undermines confidence and reduces motivation for constructive action. Reframing setbacks as temporary and manageable restores balance. Viewing challenges as learning experiences and focusing on practical solutions reduces emotional tension and allows rational evaluation of circumstances. As reframing becomes habitual, emotional responses stabilize, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached with calm, clear reasoning rather than disproportionate worry or fear. Over time, consistent perspective adjustment strengthens resilience. Negative thoughts tied to setbacks lose power, clarity improves, and the mind maintains focus, calm, and constructive engagement with both minor and major challenges. Negative thinking often escalates when attention is fixated on perceived imperfections. Minor flaws are magnified in the mind, creating stress, self-doubt, and emotional tension. This distorted focus diverts energy from problem-solving and reinforces negative internal dialogue. Shifting attention to strengths and accomplishments restores mental balance. Recognizing skills, achievements, and progress strengthens confidence and reduces the influence of perfectionism-driven thoughts. As focus on constructive elements increases, emotional stability improves. The mind evaluates challenges rationally, confidence grows, and stress diminishes, allowing effective decision-making without fear or hesitation. Over time, habitual attention to strengths and progress builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to perceived flaws diminish, clarity improves, and the mind maintains calm, focus, and constructive engagement under both routine and challenging circumstances. Negative thinking often becomes more powerful when the mind focuses excessively on what could go wrong instead of what is possible. Imagining worst-case scenarios amplifies stress and anxiety, consuming mental energy that could be applied to constructive solutions. This habit reduces confidence and can paralyze decision-making, making even small challenges seem overwhelming. Interrupting this pattern requires consciously redirecting attention toward realistic possibilities, evaluating situations logically, considering probable outcomes, and prioritizing actionable steps empower the mind, reducing the hold of imagined threats and creating a sense of control. As this approach becomes habitual, emotional stability improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and the mind responds to challenges with clarity and rational judgment. Instead of reactive worry, fear-driven speculation loses its influence over thoughts and behavior. Over time, grounding thoughts in reality builds resilience. Negative thinking, tied to imagined scenarios, weakens, allowing the mind to maintain focus, calm, and effective problem-solving, even in uncertain or high-pressure situations. Negative thoughts often intensify when the mind dwells on perceived failures rather than learning from experience. Replaying errors repeatedly fosters guilt, frustration, and diminished self-esteem, creating a feedback loop that reinforces anxiety and reduces clarity. Reframing past mistakes as opportunities for growth restores balance. Recognizing that errors are temporary and contextual allows the mind to release emotional tension and approach current challenges with a more objective perspective. As this reframing strengthens, emotional regulation improves, confidence increases, stress diminishes, and the mind evaluates situations rationally rather than reacting to the weight of past experiences. Self-doubt loses its grip. Over time, consistent reframing of mistakes builds mental resilience. Negative thoughts tied to perceived failure weaken, clarity becomes habitual, and the mind develops a sustained ability to approach challenges with calm, focus, and constructive problem-solving. Negative thinking often grows when attention is scattered among multiple unresolved problems. Juggling competing demands and responsibilities reduces focus, increases stress, and allows intrusive, self-defeating thoughts to dominate perception. This fragmented attention undermines clarity and productivity. Restoring focus begins with prioritization and sequential problem-solving, addressing one task at a time, organizing thought processes, and minimizing distractions strengthens mental control and reduces emotional strain. As focus consolidates, emotional responses stabilize, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and the mind approaches each problem rationally rather than reacting impulsively. Productivity and problem-solving improve naturally. Over time, consistent practice of attention management enhances resilience. Negative thoughts lose their dominance. Clarity becomes habitual, and the mind navigates complex challenges with calm, focus, and emotional stability. Negative thoughts often dominate when the mind perceives a lack of control over outcomes. Feeling powerless triggers anxiety, fear, and mental fatigue, reinforcing a sense of helplessness. The perception of being unable to influence results magnifies emotional tension and encourages worry-driven thinking. Restoring a sense of agency begins by identifying actionable steps, no matter how small. Focusing on controllable elements redirects energy from worry to practical solutions, strengthening the mind's sense of competence and reducing fear. As control is reinforced, emotional regulation improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and decision-making becomes deliberate rather than reactive. The mind learns to approach challenges rationally instead of being dominated by emotional pressure. Over time, habitual focus on areas of control strengthens resilience. Negative thoughts tied to perceived helplessness diminish, clarity improves, and the mind maintains calm, constructive focus under pressure or uncertainty. Negative thinking frequently escalates when the mind dwells on hypothetical worst-case scenarios. Imagining unlikely catastrophes amplifies anxiety, reduces clarity, and drains mental energy that could be used for practical action. This creates a feedback loop of fear-driven speculation. Grounding attention in reality mitigates the effect. Evaluating actual probabilities, focusing on achievable outcomes, and taking tangible steps shift energy from worry to problem solving, reducing emotional tension. As realistic assessment becomes habitual, confidence increases, emotional reactions stabilize, stress diminishes, and the mind approaches challenges with rationality and composure rather than fear. Over time, habitual focus on likely outcomes builds resilience. Negative thinking tied to imagined catastrophes weakens, allowing the mind to sustain calm, clarity, and constructive engagement in both routine and high-pressure situations. Negative thoughts often intensify when self-criticism dominates mental patterns. Focusing excessively on personal shortcomings or errors creates emotional tension, reduces confidence, and hinders rational decision-making. Even minor mistakes are amplified in perception, creating unnecessary stress. Counteracting this requires cultivating balanced self-reflection. Recognizing strengths alongside areas for growth fosters objectivity, reduces the emotional intensity of self-critical thoughts, and encourages constructive action. As balanced self-assessment becomes habitual, emotional stability improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and the mind approaches challenges rationally rather than reacting to negative internal dialogue. Over time, consistent practice of objective self-reflection builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to self-criticism weaken, clarity strengthens, and the mind maintains focus, calm, and productive engagement with challenges. Negative thinking often arises when attention is overwhelmed by multiple responsibilities or challenges. Mental clutter reduces focus, amplifies stress, and allows intrusive, self-defeating thoughts to dominate perception. Productivity suffers and emotional tension escalates. Restoring focus involves prioritization and sequential problem solving, tackling tasks one at a time, organizing thought processes, and eliminating distractions strengthens clarity, reduces stress, and encourages effective decision-making. As focus consolidates, emotional regulation improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and challenges are addressed rationally, rather than through reactive worry or fear. Productivity and mental clarity naturally increase. Over time, habitual attention management enhances resilience. Negative thoughts lose their influence. Clarity becomes a default state, and the mind sustains calm, focus, and emotional stability, even under complex or demanding conditions. Negative thoughts often escalate when mental energy is depleted. Fatigue, stress, or prolonged mental effort diminishes the mind's ability to filter harmful ideas, making intrusive thoughts feel more convincing. Emotional responses intensify, reducing clarity and increasing vulnerability to worry. Restoration of energy through rest, breaks, and replenishing activities strengthens resilience. Recharging cognitive and emotional reserves allows the mind to process challenges rationally rather than reactively. As energy levels are restored, emotional regulation improves, confidence increases, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached with calm, measured reasoning rather than impulsive fear or self-doubt. Over time, habitual attention to mental and physical restoration builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to fatigue lose dominance, clarity improves, and the mind maintains focus, calm, and constructive engagement, even in high-pressure situations. Negative thinking often grows when minor setbacks are interpreted as catastrophic failures. Small mistakes or delays are magnified, producing frustration, anxiety, and self-doubt. This distortion reduces clarity, undermines confidence, and discourages constructive problem-solving. Reframing setbacks as temporary and manageable restores perspective. Recognizing that errors and delays are part of the learning process reduces emotional tension and encourages rational evaluation of current challenges. As reframing becomes habitual, emotional responses stabilize. Confidence grows, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached with clarity and composure rather than fear or panic. Over time, consistent perspective adjustment strengthens resilience. Negative thoughts tied to perceived failure fade, clarity improves, and the mind sustains calm, focused, and productive engagement with both minor and major challenges. Negative thinking often dominates when attention is fixated on perceived imperfections. The mind amplifies small flaws, creating stress, self-doubt, and emotional tension. This distorted focus reduces mental clarity and limits effective problem solving. Shifting attention to strengths, accomplishments, and actionable improvements restores balance. Recognizing personal skills and progress strengthens confidence and diminishes the influence of perfectionism-driven thoughts. As constructive focus increases, emotional regulation improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached rationally and calmly, with clarity guiding decisions. Over time, habitual attention to strengths and progress builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to perceived imperfections weaken, clarity strengthens, and the mind maintains calm, focus, and constructive engagement under all circumstances. Negative thinking often strengthens when the mind is consumed by doubts about the future. Imagining potential failures or obstacles creates anxiety that feels uncontrollable, draining focus and energy. This pattern makes even routine decisions feel overwhelming and amplifies emotional strain. Shifting focus toward realistic, actionable steps restores clarity. Evaluating what can be controlled, prioritizing achievable goals, and planning practical solutions empowers the mind, reducing the power of imagined threats and creating a sense of agency. As this approach becomes habitual, emotional stability improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and the mind approaches challenges rationally rather than reactively. Fear-driven speculation loses its influence on thoughts and decisions. Over time, consistently grounding attention in reality builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to uncertainty weaken, and the mind maintains calm, clarity, and constructive problem-solving, even in situations of unpredictability. Negative thoughts frequently escalate when attention is focused on past mistakes. Replaying errors repeatedly amplifies guilt, regret, and anxiety, which cloud the ability to respond effectively to present challenges. Emotional energy is drained by self-criticism instead of being used for solutions. Reframing mistakes as learning opportunities restores balance. Understanding that errors are part of growth allows the mind to release tension, focus on actionable steps, and approach current problems with a rational perspective. As this mindset develops, emotional responses stabilize, confidence increases, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached with calm reasoning, rather than being overshadowed by fear or self-doubt. Over time, consistent practice of reframing mistakes builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to past errors lose dominance, clarity strengthens, and the mind maintains focus, calm, and constructive engagement with both present and future challenges. Negative thinking often intensifies when the mind is scattered across multiple, unresolved concerns. Attempting to manage too many tasks simultaneously reduces focus, amplifies stress, and allows intrusive thoughts to dominate perception. Productivity and clarity are compromised. Restoring focus involves prioritization and sequential problem solving, addressing one task at a time, eliminating distractions, and organizing thought processes strengthens clarity and reduces emotional tension. As attention consolidates, emotional regulation improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and challenges are met with measured reasoning rather than reactive worry. Productivity and mental clarity naturally increase. Over time, consistent attention management enhances resilience. Negative thoughts lose their grip, clarity becomes habitual, and the mind navigates complex or high-pressure situations with calm, focus, and composure. Negative thoughts often dominate when perceived control over outcomes is low. Feeling powerless triggers anxiety, worry, and mental fatigue, reinforcing a sense of helplessness. This perception magnifies emotional tension and allows fear-driven thinking to dominate decision-making. Restoring a sense of agency begins with identifying actionable steps, however small. Focusing energy on controllable elements empowers the mind and reduces the emotional influence of perceived helplessness. As control is reinforced, emotional stability improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and decision-making becomes deliberate and rational rather than reactive. The mind learns to approach challenges with composure and clarity. Over time, habitual attention to what can be controlled builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to powerlessness lose dominance, and the mind maintains calm focus and constructive engagement even under uncertainty or pressure. Negative thinking frequently escalates when attention is consumed by hypothetical worst-case scenarios. Imagining unlikely catastrophes amplifies stress, reduces clarity, and consumes mental energy that could be applied to practical solutions. This habit reinforces fear-driven speculation. Redirecting focus toward realistic assessments mitigates this effect. Evaluating probabilities, prioritizing manageable actions, and taking tangible steps shifts energy from worry to problem solving, reducing emotional strain. As realistic assessment becomes habitual, emotional stability strengthens, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached rationally rather than reactively. The mind responds with calm reasoning instead of fear-driven reactions. Over time, consistent focus on realistic outcomes builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to imagined catastrophes weaken, allowing the mind to maintain clarity, calm, and productive engagement under uncertainty or pressure. Negative thinking often intensifies when self-criticism dominates internal dialogue. Focusing excessively on perceived flaws or errors magnifies stress, diminishes confidence, and disrupts rational thinking. Even minor mistakes can seem catastrophic in perception. Counteracting this requires cultivating balanced self-reflection. Recognizing strengths alongside areas for growth fosters objectivity, reduces emotional tension, and encourages constructive action rather than fear-driven hesitation. As balanced self-assessment strengthens, emotional stability improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached rationally rather than through reactive worry or self-doubt. Over time, consistent practice of objective self-reflection builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to self-criticism lose their influence. Clarity improves and the mind maintains calm, focus, and productive engagement with challenges. Negative thoughts often emerge when attention is fragmented across competing demands. Multitasking and unresolved responsibilities amplify stress, reduce clarity, and allow intrusive thoughts to dominate perception. Productivity and emotional stability are compromised. Restoring focus requires prioritization and sequential problem solving. Addressing one task at a time, organizing thought processes, and minimizing distractions strengthen clarity, reduce stress, and encourage effective decision-making. As attention consolidates, emotional regulation improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached with rationality rather than impulsive worry. Mental clarity and productivity increase naturally. Over time, disciplined attention management enhances resilience. Negative thoughts lose dominance. Clarity becomes habitual, and the mind navigates complex challenges with calm, focus, and emotional stability. Negative thinking often escalates when energy levels are depleted. Fatigue, stress, or prolonged mental effort reduces the mind's capacity to filter harmful thoughts, making intrusive ideas more compelling and emotionally charged. Emotional reactivity intensifies and clarity diminishes. Restoring energy through rest, recovery, and rejuvenating activities strengthens resilience. Replenishing cognitive and emotional reserves allows the mind to respond rationally rather than reactively, reducing the influence of negative thinking. As energy is restored, emotional stability improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached calmly and constructively rather than through fear or impulsive reactions. Over time, habitual attention to energy restoration builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to fatigue lose influence, clarity strengthens, and the mind maintains calm, focus, and productive engagement even under high-pressure circumstances. Negative thinking frequently intensifies when minor setbacks are perceived as catastrophic failures. Small errors or delays are magnified, generating stress, frustration, and self-doubt. This distorted perception undermines confidence and discourages constructive problem-solving. Reframing setbacks as temporary and manageable restores perspective. Viewing challenges as opportunities for growth reduces emotional tension and encourages rational evaluation of circumstances. As reframing becomes habitual, emotional regulation strengthens, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached with calm, clarity, and rational judgment rather than fear or panic. Over time, consistent perspective adjustment builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to setbacks lose their influence. Clarity improves, and the mind maintains calm, focused, and constructive engagement with challenges. Negative thinking often dominates when attention is fixated on perceived imperfections. Small flaws are amplified in the mind, creating self-doubt, stress, and emotional tension. This distorted focus reduces clarity and limits effective problem-solving. Shifting attention to strengths, accomplishments, and actionable improvements restores balance. Recognizing personal skills and progress strengthens confidence and reduces the influence of perfectionism-driven thoughts. As constructive focus increases, emotional stability improves, confidence grows, stress diminishes, and challenges are approached rationally, with calm reasoning guiding decisions. Over time, habitual attention to strengths and progress builds resilience. Negative thoughts tied to perceived imperfections weaken, clarity strengthens, and the mind maintains calm, focus, and constructive engagement in all circumstances. Every thought has the potential to shape our reality, and the mind's focus determines whether negativity dominates or clarity prevails. Negative thinking is not an unchangeable force. It is a habit that can be identified, intercepted, and replaced with constructive patterns. Through conscious awareness, structured focus, and realistic evaluation, the mind can transform its response to stress, setbacks, and uncertainty. By consistently shifting attention from imagined failures to actionable solutions, from self-criticism to balanced reflection, and from fear-driven scenarios to practical outcomes, emotional resilience grows. Confidence replaces doubt, clarity replaces chaos, and focus replaces distraction. These practices create a mental environment where negative thoughts lose power and constructive thinking thrives. The journey to mastering thought patterns is ongoing, but each conscious step strengthens the mind's ability to remain calm, clear, and rational under pressure. Resilience becomes habitual, decision-making becomes confident, and the emotional weight of negativity diminishes steadily. Ultimately, learning to manage negative thoughts empowers the individual to reclaim mental and emotional freedom. Life's challenges are no longer paralyzing, but opportunities for growth. With clarity, focus, and rational engagement, the mind operates at its highest potential, leaving negativity behind and embracing a future shaped by conscious, constructive, and purposeful thought.